In 1989, a mid-level Communist Party official watched tanks roll through Tiananmen Square. He drew one conclusion, not that the party had gone too far, but that it hadn't gone far enough. His name was Xi Jinping. 25 years later, he would become the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao, and he has been rebuilding China ever since. China today is the world's second largest economy. It has the world's largest standing army. It manufactures more goods than the United States, Germany, and Japan combined, but China, in 2012, when Xi took power, was also a country with a problem. Corruption had hollowed out the Communist Party. Economic growth was masking rising inequality. Local officials ran their regions like private fiefdoms, and the party's grip on society was loosening. Xi Jinping looked at this picture and saw a system that needed to be torn apart and rebuilt. Not replaced, rebuilt. That distinction matters more than almost anything else about him. Xi Jinping was born in Beijing in 1953. His father, Xi Jinping, was a founding revolutionary, one of the men who built the People's Republic from scratch. Then, in 1962, his father was purged. Accused of disloyalty, he was stripped of his position and disappeared into detention for 16 years. The family lost everything. The son watched it happen. When the Cultural Revolution came, Xi Jinping, then 15 years old, again was sent to a cave village in rural Shanxi province. He spent 7 years there, farming, hauling coal, sleeping on a flea-infested bed. Most people who lived through that experience came out broken or bitter. Xi came out with a blueprint. Chaos destroys everything, including loyal men, including families, including the party itself. Only discipline prevents chaos. Only centralized control prevents discipline from collapsing. That is not a political theory. It is a lesson learned at the age of 15. Xi has been acting on it ever since. Xi Jinping is an architect. He does not govern the system he inherited. He has replaced it. Xi became General Secretary of the Communist Party in November 2012. He was not the obvious candidate. He had spent most of his career in provincial posts: Fujian, Zhejiang, Shanghai, far from the Beijing power center. He had no dominant faction behind him, no obvious power base. That obscurity was the point. The party's senior leadership wanted someone manageable, someone who would govern by consensus, the way his predecessors Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, both general secretaries before him, had done. They were wrong. His father had been destroyed by a party that turned on its own. Xi had watched, as a child, what happened when loyalty offered no protection. He drew a precise conclusion: the only safe position is the position from which you cannot be purged. Within months of taking office, Xi launched what he called an anti-corruption campaign. It has never stopped. Over a decade, more than 1 million officials were investigated in a single year. By 2025, nearly 7 times the number when Xi took office. Senior generals, ministers, even former members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the 7-man body that holds supreme authority in China, were brought down. Each removal was real. Each removal was also strategic. Every major figure taken down had been a potential rival. Every investigation transferred power upward. Towards Xi, by 2016, he had been formally designated the party's core leader, a title unused since Deng Xiaoping. By 2017, Xi Jinping thought was written into the party constitution, placing him alongside Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping as one of only 3 leaders whose names appear in the founding documents of the state. And in 2018, the National People's Congress, China's legislature, which ratifies party decisions, abolished presidential term limits. Xi could now remain in office indefinitely. This was not an accident. It was architecture. He rebuilt the institutions around him the same way. Discipline inspection commissions, internal party bodies responsible for investigating corruption and political loyalty, were expanded and given sweeping new authority. The military was structurally reorganized. State media was consolidated under central party oversight. The military purge, in particular, illustrates how the architecture works. Since 2022, over 100 senior PLA officers have been removed, investigated, or disappeared. Generals, theater commanders, the heads of the rocket force. In January 2026, Xi removed the PLA's two most senior officers, including his closest military ally of decades. No one, it turns out, is too loyal to purge. Each move in isolation looks like anti-corruption enforcement. Together, they form a single structure, authority concentrated in one office, held by one man, insulated from challenge from any direction. Xi also reversed the ideological direction set by Deng Xiaoping. Deng had deliberately weakened ideology after Mao. He wanted pragmatism, not doctrine. His famous phrase, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice," was a deliberate rejection of Maoist rigidity. Xi reversed that entirely. Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era is now mandatory study for party members, students, and the general public. A state app called Xuexi Qiangguo tracks daily study completion. This is not nostalgia for Mao. It is something more deliberate, ideological conformity as a structural instrument of control. The boy who watched his father erased for ideological deviation has rebuilt the system so that no one can do the same to him. Xi's domestic reconstruction has a direct foreign policy counterpart. China under Xi has become more assertive, more visible, and more confrontational in its dealings with the outside world. The clearest example is the South China Sea. China claims roughly 90% of this strategically vital waterway, a claim that an international arbitration tribunal rejected in 2016. Under Xi, China has built artificial islands, installed military installations on them, and repeatedly confronted Philippine and Vietnamese vessels in disputed waters. The tribunal ruling has been ignored. In 2017, China opened its first overseas military base in Djibouti, on the Horn of Africa, at one of the world's most critical shipping choke points. A second is reportedly under development in Cambodia. The Belt and Road Initiative, Xi's signature foreign policy instrument, has financed infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Latin America: ports, railways, highways, power plants. The economic rationale is genuine. But so is the strategic logic, a network of infrastructure dependencies that extends Chinese influence across 3 continents and reduces the leverage of Western institutions over countries that use it. Then there is Taiwan. Xi has said publicly, repeatedly, that reunification with Taiwan is a historical inevitability. He has not ruled out the use of force. Under his leadership, the People's Liberation Army, China's military, has dramatically increased the frequency and scale of exercises around the island. In 2022 and 2023, those exercises included simulated naval blockades. The message was deliberate. Taiwan is not simply a territorial question for Xi. It is an ideological one. A democratic, self-governing Chinese society, one that has not collapsed, that functions visibly well, is a permanent, living argument against the claim that the Communist Party's model is the only viable path for China. Xi grew up watching his father erased for contradicting the party line. He understands better than almost anyone what it means for an alternative to exist. Taiwan is an alternative. That is why it occupies a different category in his worldview than almost any other issue. On trade and technology, the relationship between China and the United States has shifted from competitive interdependence to structured rivalry. Tariffs, technology export controls, investment restrictions, both sides have driven this shift. But Xi's strategic objective is explicit: reduce China's dependence on Western technology, in semiconductors, in software, in critical infrastructure. Before that, dependence can be used as leverage. The goal is not isolation, it is insulation. The ability to function independently of systems that could, in a crisis, be turned off. That is the logic of a man who watched, as a child, how quickly external forces can dismantle everything a family built. He is applying it to an entire country. Xi Jinping has rebuilt China's political system in his own image. The strongest critique of what he has built is not that it is powerful, it is that it is fragile. The architecture has a structural flaw. One-man rule concentrates decision-making. It eliminates internal dissent. It means bad decisions travel fast and correct slowly. China's response to the early stages of the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan made this visible. Local officials suppressed information. They were afraid to report bad news upward. That institutional fear, the fear of contradicting the center, was not a bug in the system Xi built. It is a feature. The economy shows the same pattern. China's real estate sector entered a prolonged crisis in 2021 and has not recovered. Youth unemployment hit a recorded high of 21% in 2023. The government then suspended publishing the data for months before resuming with a revised methodology. By late 2025, the rate remained close to 19%. Private entrepreneurs who built China's technology sector have faced sustained regulatory crackdowns, and several of the country's most prominent business figures have disappeared from public view for extended periods. The signal is clear. Private wealth is tolerated. It exists at the party's discretion. Human rights organizations, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have documented a severe and systematic deterioration in civil liberties under Xi. In Xinjiang, the United Nations concluded in 2022 that Chinese authorities had committed serious human rights violations against the Uyghur population, which may constitute international crimes. In Hong Kong, the political and legal framework that existed before 2019 has been dismantled. The architect built a system designed to last. The question the system cannot answer is what happens when the architect is gone. Xi Jinping has spent over a decade building toward a single organizing principle, a strong party, a unified party, led by one man with an unambiguous vision. That vision was formed in a cave in Shanxi province when he was 15 years old, and the world he had been born into had already collapsed around him. He has spent every year since making sure it cannot collapse again. Whether that project produces stability or crisis, for China and for the world, is a question still being answered. Xi is 72 years old. He is expected to begin a fourth term in 2027. There is no named successor, no visible transition plan. The next party Congress will likely be defined not by who replaces him, but by whether he finally signals one. The architect has built a system designed to outlast any challenge. Whether it can outlast him is the one question no one inside China is permitted to ask.